What's it like to move out from Chicago to New York City? Based on my personal experience, pretty awesome. But if you don't trust my take, you can ask Carrie Meaver from Theodore Dreiser, Sister Carrie, our August book club pick. Welcome back to Pens and Poison Literary Lovers. I'm your host Liza, and we're back this month with another installment of Liza's book club. For the month of August, we read Sister Carrie together, and I'm so excited to read and analyze it with you today. Here on Pens and Poison, we love all things literature, but we also recognize that we all run busy lives and don't always find the time to read, myself included. I'm here to remedy that with Liza's Book Club, a brand new series where we commit to reading just one book a month and analyzing it together. Each month, I'll read a book with you and we'll analyze it and discuss it at the end of the month through questions that you can leave me here, over email, or over on Instagram. You can also check out the companion reading guide that's up on my blog that should have been mailed out to you if you guys are on my mailing list. If you're not on my mailing list, don't forget to sign up at lizalibes.com or over on my Substack. We'll also link the study guide below. This month, we'll be diving into Theodore Dreiser's Sister Carrie, which follows the young Carrie Meaver through her time in Chicago and eventually in New York City. If you're a big fan of Liza's book club and are excited for the analysis of Sister Carrie, don't forget to subscribe to us over here on Pens and Poison or follow us over on Instagram at Pens and Poison. I'm super excited to bring you so much really great literature this year and beyond. Let's get to Sister Carrie. So I first found out about Sister Carrie through my parents and grandparents, Soviet expats who read the book when they were in school. Dreiser was an American early 20th century author from Indiana who enjoyed a successful career as a journalist. Yet, despite his widespread journalistic work and his two famous novels, Sister Carrie and American Tragedy, I had never heard him mentioned in school alongside other American greats such as Mark Twain or Ernest Hemingway. That got me wondering why Dreiser was so widely read in the Soviet Union but failed to appear in American curricula. After I did some digging, I found an answer that's exactly what you might expect. Dreiser was a hardcore socialist with Stalinist sympathies. Dreiser was a great critic of American capitalism and believed that America was worth saving by moving away from the capitalist system and into more of a socialist regime. We see hints of his disdain towards capitalism early on in the novel, such as in Carrie's saunter through Chicago department stores and shops in Chapter 3, where she witnesses the harsh working conditions of minimum wage and manual laborers. Yet Carrie sees all of this as beneath her and aspires to a different sort of life. Knowing that a staunch Stalinist wrote the novel, this bit surprised me a little bit. It's not an encomium on socialism towards the beginning, and seems to be more about the American dream, though Dreiser has some hot takes on the American dream, as we'll learn a little bit later. The novel certainly filled a gap in my historical brain. I've read a lot of Victorian literature and am quite familiar with England of the 1890s, at least as it's depicted in literature, but with the exception of Edith Wharton novels, some of which are set even a little bit later, I've never read a work of literature set in this time period in America. This is what's known as the Gilded Age, of course. There's that Mark Twain novel, The Gilded Age, which is where we get the name for this particular period of the turn of the century America, but I'd never actually read The Gilded Age, so I can't think of any other novels off the top of my head that were written around this time period and also set in America, so that makes Sister Carrie a special read in itself. Dreiser's naturalistic style of writing made him a controversial figure in his time, especially with his raw depiction of poverty, ambition, and the pursuit of pleasure. While his work didn't find much traction domestically because of these things, his novels resonated deeply with readers in the Soviet Union, where his critique of capitalism and exploration of societal issues aligned with the state's ideological values. Sister Carrie is fundamentally about the American dream, both the glamours of it and, of course, its pitfalls. So we have three main characters in the novel: Carrie, Drouet, and Herstwood. Carrie is the protagonist. She's a young, ambitious woman who seeks a better life in Chicago and eventually New York. Throughout the novel, she evolves from being a naive country girl into a sophisticated and successful actress, though she remains haunted by feelings of emptiness and discontent. Drouet is a charming and carefree traveling salesman who becomes Carrie's first lover. Drouet represents the sort of easygoing, superficial aspects of urban life and is largely responsible for introducing Carrie to a more glamorous lifestyle. Then we have Herstwood. Herstwood's a manager at a high-end bar in Chicago. He becomes infatuated with Carrie and eventually ruins his life to be with her. His decline from a respected businessman to a destitute wanderer serves as a counterpoint to Carrie's rise, which highlights the harsh realities of social ambition. So the novel opens with Carrie's train ride from a small town in Wisconsin towards industrial Chicago. On the train, she meets a dapper man named Zweig who promises to call on her the following Monday. Carrie then arrives at her sister's apartment and immediately sets out to look for work, becoming quickly disillusioned by the working conditions of industrial city life. Soon she's dismissed from her job after falling ill, and out of desperation takes money from Dre to secure a place of her own. Dre and Carrie then eventually move in together, and Carrie begins to feel morally insecure. In the 1890s, of course, it would have been a scandal for an unmarried couple to share a living space. Carrie later meets Dre's friend Hurstwood, with whom she enters into an affair, and shortly after she has her first debut on the stage as an actress. As Dre and Hurstwood both marvel at her newfound talents, Carrie resolves to run away with Hurstwood, yet then is disappointed to learn that Hurstwood is married. She sulks until one day Dre begins to suspect her affair, leading to a rift between the two that causes Dre to move out. Meanwhile, Hurstwood decides he's going to do whatever it takes to get Carrie back and comes to her one night, claiming that Dre is sick and they have to leave immediately. He puts Carrie on a train to Detroit and forces her to unwittingly run away with him. It's not until halfway through the train ride that Carrie suspects that Hurstwood has tricked her. He nevertheless soon convinces her to marry him, and the two move out to New York City. Hurstwood then takes another managerial post. Carrie begins to enjoy New York life, but harsh conditions soon lead to the closure of the bar that Hurstwood manages, and he's left to look for a new job. In a rather predictable plot twist, he's unable to find anything and soon is forced to become a beggar on the streets. Meanwhile, Carrie becomes disillusioned by Hurstwood's incompetence and she leaves him to become an actress. She soon enjoys staying on the stage and rises to riches by the end of the novel. However, despite her ambition and success, she isn't happy, and Dreiser leaves us asking, what constitutes happiness then, if not success and ambition? He never really gives us a proper answer, though, which is one of the things that annoyed me about the book. I wouldn't say that this is quite a theme-driven novel either, but we do have a few central themes throughout. As I mentioned earlier, the main theme of the novel is, of course, the American dream. So from the novel's start, Carrie embarks on a journey from a small town to Chicago to eventually New York City. Throughout the novel, she's drawn to the allure of glamour, luxury, extravagance, a lifestyle that Dre first introduces her to. One of the most telling scenes of her draw to luxury is a dinner she shares with her friends the Vances and their cousin Robert Ames at a fancy restaurant called Sherry's in New York. She's captivated by the elevated prices until Ames suggests to her that all these luxuries are unnecessary. By the end of the novel, she does live in luxury, but is unhappy, leading Dreiser to suggest that the American dream is perhaps an illusion. Another big theme that we see in the novel is urban life. So the novel is set in two urban metropolises, Chicago and New York, and highlights some of the struggles that come with such a lifestyle, especially around the turn of the century. Hurstwood struggles to find decent work, and Carrie's ultimately lonely and alienated, so the bustle of the city life may have its allure for these two characters, but the hyperfixation on individuality that ensues from this dynamic leads them to experience a deep loneliness. Dreiser is also a key figure in the naturalist movement. So another big theme here is naturalism. So naturalism is the literary movement that emphasized the idea that individual people are often at mercy of forces beyond their control, whether economic forces, social forces, or psychological forces. Naturalist writing paints reality in stark and raw colors rather than through euphemistic or flowery writing. Carrie and Hurstwood's fall are both depicted as natural consequences of their environment rather than the result of free will. But what bothered me most about the novel is Dreiser's insistence that success is arbitrary and that self-actualization is an illusion. Of course, you have a lot of skepticism about the American dream, and Carrie sort of remembers Ames's words as she's sitting in her fancy hotel room at the end of the novel, thinking that, luxury is not the be-all and end-all. But I did think that some of the characters were a little bit unrealistic in how they experienced these goals and ambitions and, how they reacted to their fates. So, first of all, Hurstwood's fate, I thought, was entirely unrealistic. So, if he'd been resourceful enough to be a manager in Chicago, you would expect that maybe he'd figure something out, especially in the Gilded Age in New York City. So you can see a bit of Dreiser's own prejudices here about maybe the unfairness of life creeping in. So Hurstwood becomes a desperate, complacent, despicable character by the end of the novel. If he had any of the personality traits in him originally that led him to success in Chicago, he probably would have also risen to success in New York. You don't just wake up one day and become a manager and then lose those skills. Percival was also very despicable in his treatment of Carrie, and he grew extremely complacent with his job search 3/4 throughout the novel. His fate was really one of the first times in a novel that I did not feel sorry for a character's extreme misery. Like, he sort of deserved it. He did absolutely nothing to really find a job. He sort of tried, but he really seemed to give up and spent half the time kind of just sitting at home, which, once again, is, of course, a commentary on the harsh working conditions in New York at that time, and still some of the harsh working conditions in New York, but at the same time, once again, if he was resourceful enough to make it that far in Chicago, he would have at least gotten something in New York. Let's be realistic here. So yeah, I think the fact that he became a beggar towards the end of the novel might have been a little bit extreme. Percival also really had no redeeming qualities. It was unclear why Carrie chose to stay with him for so long after he literally kidnapped her. I genuinely think she was right to leave him at the end. He was lazy, didn't seem to care much about her well-being, especially at a time when, men were expected to be the primary providers. Carrie was kind of dull and flat herself, didn't really care about anything except for luxury and nice things. In the very end, she ends up unhappy, and that's sort of also dissatisfying to me because she was so empty throughout that really it should have been consistent with her character to be happy with luxury. Like, she's maybe not so deep throughout the novel as to have the realization that, okay, money and riches aren't everything. So I think the fact that she's miserable at the end seemed a little bit unrealistic to me because she's probably precisely the sort of character who would have been happy with that sort of lifestyle, and her whole trajectory, her personal life was just pushing people away from her. She sort of pushes Dre away from her a lot when Dre actually really, really helps her. So once again, I thought that it was unrealistic that she was unhappy because she is exactly the sort of person who should have been happy. The message, of course, that Dreiser is trying to get across here is that wealth does not bring happiness, but I was also left wondering then, what does bring happiness? The obvious answer here might be love and human relationships or something along those lines for these, for deeper pursuits in life, but there was really none of that in the novel either, and I didn't see Dreiser ever once make the point that, okay, maybe Carrie would have been happier if she striven to really fall in love or build a community or, even find fulfillment in the creative pursuit of acting. Carrie discards people who are close to her. She doesn't really seem interested in forming bonds. I mean, maybe that's sort of the point, but you would think that Dreiser would leave us with a little bit more to work with. Like, I think Dreiser's so caught up with this critique of capitalism that he forgets that being on the stage in itself is an artistic pursuit, and people can want to act independent of money. Maybe a better ending might have been Carrie's realization that acting isn't about the money she's making, but it's about the creativity that goes into being an actress. And if she was such a damn good actress to begin with, if she was such a good actress to make it so far in the world, especially in New York, coming from no-name beginnings, she realistically should have identified meaning in this creative pursuit. You can't just criticize one system and not propose an alternative, Dreiser. So, the novel left me feeling a little bit as if the message were pointless. I didn't really see what the message was. The other thing that really bothered me about the novel was Dre's character. I also found Dre's character to be extremely flat. So Dreiser kept insisting that, Carrie wasn't happy with him and she was bored by him, but once again, it was really unclear why she was bored by him, what qualities in Carrie led her to desire someone more sophisticated, like Percival, who honestly wasn't really sophisticated to begin with either. Dre actually was probably the only character in the book I didn't want to push off a balcony. He was very kind to Carrie. He seemed to have no ulterior motive in helping her. He seemed also very taken by her. I think he treated her well overall. I didn't really seem to understand then why Carrie would randomly run off with Percival. Percival had really zero redeeming qualities. We're told he's intelligent, but once again, his actions throughout the novel seem to suggest otherwise. When Dre comes back to Carrie at the end of the novel, she also sort of discards him. Once again, you think a better ending might have been, wait, it's not about money, it's about forming bonds with people close to you and, the ability to still retain these relationships with people who helped you get to wealth and fame once you're there. But nope, there was none of that either, so the characters are just all unhappy from their own doing, and this is maybe my problem with socialists. They identify a million problems and really propose no solutions, and don't really have anything to say except money is bad, it doesn't bring happiness, and it's like, okay, so then what does bring happiness? A lot of socialists will say, okay, family, communities, the artistic pursuit. Once again, Dreiser did not bring any of those things up in the novel, so I didn't really think it was a great argument for socialism and against, capitalism and the American dream. I mean, if you want to argue that the American dream doesn't exist and socialism is good, fine. But once again, Dreiser, what's the alternative? Should Carrie have given up her wealth and shared it with Percewood? No, of course not. Percewood sucks. Everyone sucked in the novel. Don't feel bad for the working class in the novel either, because they also sucked, at least the way, Dreiser portrays them. At least you have Dickens painting the working class in a very redeeming light that, invites us to consider alternatives to the brutality of the English system in the Victorian age. Dreiser, really not so much. I think there's nothing that he's really critiquing that resonated with me, and certainly if his goal were to critique the American dream here, I did not personally think he did a very good job of it, just because there's no sort of deeper meaning at the end of the novel that I was left with. Guys, not one of my favorites, but I can see why it was so heavily pushed in the Soviet Union. I didn't think it was so in-your-face pro-socialist throughout, which I guess was a pleasant surprise, but it was very clearly an anti-capitalist message by the end of it. So, I guess we did an anti-Soviet novel last month, so gotta balance it out. Alright, we have some audience questions now. Let's take a look. We have someone from Instagram. The question, did anyone find Carrie's decision to continue to New York with Percewood a little bit crazy? Absolutely. Percewood literally kidnaps her. She seems very upset at first, and then she's sort of like, whatever, let me marry this guy. Like, dude, seriously, I didn't find a lot of the actions or reactions amongst characters to be super believable. There are, so many other ways that Dreiser could have written that scene. At least, maybe he could have made Percewood do something nice for Carrie so that maybe she warms up to him over time and she's kind of like, okay, whatever, I'm just gonna marry this guy. So, once again, a little bit of a lack of depth of these characters. Alright, so our next question is, you mentioned that your parents read this novel in the Soviet Union. What is their take on this? So, my parents and grandparents have all read this novel, and I think, at least I know my grandma enjoyed it. I don't think they were reading it as, this anti-American dream novel or this pro-socialist novel. I think in the Soviet Union it was kind of taught as just, these are three people who are interacting with one another. So I think they weren't reading it as a socialist, capitalist commentary or whatnot, which I personally think it is, and that's how I read the novel, or at least a commentary on the American dream. I think they were more reading it for just, okay, this is how Chicago is, and this is how New York is, and then, Carrie becomes an actress, yay! Alright, well, let's do one more question here. The next question is, did you have a favorite character in the novel? I personally didn't find any of the characters likable. Yes, I agree. I did not find any of the characters likable either. I guess Drouet, I was kind of rooting for Drouet, when he came back at the end of the novel. I was like, come on, Carrie, this is the only not completely despicable character in this novel, so you should just be with him and at least figure out how to share your life with someone. But no, once again, she kind of discarded him, which, again, maybe that's the point, but I didn't see what Drouet did that was so terribly wrong. He was a little bit flirty. Maybe he had that one episode where he got dinner with another girl. But once again, I didn't see Drouet as this despicable character that merited all of Carrie's wrath. So I didn't get that. Maybe that just flew over my head, but I don't think there was anything really that Drouet did that made him deserve Carrie's treatment of him. So, once again, guys, not my favorite book, but we got through it. We finished Sister Carrie, and I hope you enjoyed our discussion on Sister Carrie and learned something new today. Next month, we'll be diving into Saul Bellow's The Adventures of Augie March, which I'm super excited to read because I've been really, really meaning to read this book for a long time. I don't know why I've never read it, but here we are. So I'm starting The Adventures of Augie March this week. Really excited for that. Really excited to explore my first Saul Bellow novel. So if you're interested in hearing my analysis of The Adventures of Augie March, Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell to get notified when our next episode of Liza's Book Club goes live. And also, I would love to hear your thoughts on Sister Carrie in the comments below. What themes stood out to you? What did you think of Carrie's journey? What did you think of Dreiser's portrayal of the American dream? Let me know in the comments below. And once again, thank you all so much for joining me on Pens and Poison for Liza's Book Club. Happy reading, everyone. Hey guys, it's Liza. I'm super excited to read Augie March with you next month for our September book club pick, so don't forget to subscribe, pick up your copy of Saul Bellow's Augie March, and I'll see you back here next month for Liza's Book Club.